Steve Sarkisian's story is a Netflix doc waiting to happen, and I had a front row seat. No, literally, I was a backup QB on his team, sitting front row, dead center, watching the team meeting go down that would ultimately get him fired. 6 years before that, when he was announced as the head coach at Washington, he went straight from the presser to my high school. At least that's the story that I was told. He may have stopped for a change of clothes and to grab a Dick's Burger real quick, but the story I was told is his first recruiting visit was to Skyline High School. We had some dudes now. I've spent a lot of time around Sark as a player, but what's crazy is over the past 5 years as an analyst, I've probably spent even more time analyzing him as a head coach. That's because since the last time Sark coached me, he's achieved redemption no one in the sport really thought was possible. In 2020, he was the OC for the best offense in the country. Top 5 in points per game, total offense, yards per play, and third down conversions. 3 of the top 5 Heisman vote earners were a wide receiver, a quarterback, and a running back in his offense. That included the Heisman winner, Devontae Smith. His offensive line won the Joe Moore Award. And at the end of it all, he won the Broyles Award, given to the top assistant coach in college football. Then he took the head coach job at Texas. The program hadn't won 11 games for a decade before he got there. They won 12 games in 2023, 13 in 2024, and they entered 2025 ranked the #1 team in the AP poll. Folks can argue where he falls, but it's tough to find someone that doesn't think he's a top 5 coach in college football today, which means he could be the heir apparent to the king, Nick Saban. And while there's probably some Bama fans that want this, I don't mean taking over Alabama. Let me explain. Nick Saban left a power vacuum when he retired. He spoke on issues not just facing his team, but the sport in general. He dictated policy and influenced massive changes to college football. Some new head coach is going to step in firmly to that role over the next 5 years. You would have sounded literally insane saying this in 2016, but the new figurehead in college football might just end up being Steve Sarkisian. But that's complicated. See, Sark isn't the perfect Saban replacement. They aren't mirror images, and Sark's life isn't the perfect hero's journey where he climbed out of an abyss all to sunshine and rainbows. He had a tough stint as the offensive coordinator for the Falcons in 2018. His first season at Texas was sub-500. He had major setbacks and wins before he even got to USC. And man, there's a whole tangent we could go down of an exotic dancer's monkey mauling a trick-or-treater outside of one of his assistant coach's houses. Suffice to say, Steve Sarkisian is a difficult character to understand in college football until you realize Sark hasn't just lived one life. He's lived 3. Understanding each of them is the key to understanding Sark. So I'm going to dive into each of them. Not just because his life is fascinating. Not just because he was the first coach to ever offer me back in June of 2010, the weekend after my freshman year of high school, a day I'll never forget. But because for the next few years, he'll be one of the guys, he might be the guy shaping the future of college football. Sark's story doesn't start like most big-time coaches. In fact, he wasn't even supposed to be a football guy. At 6 feet tall and 165 pounds, nobody offered him a football scholarship out of high school. He actually walked on to USC's baseball team. That lasted 1 semester. Back home at El Camino College, he was ready to move on when the head football coach basically begged him to give quarterback a shot. By his sophomore year, Sark was setting national junior college record, 72% completion rate, All-American honors. So he transfers to BYU, plays under Norm Chow, leads them to a 14-1 season, wins the Cotton Bowl, and ends up on the cover of TV Guide. That run launched him into the CFL, then into coaching, where Pete Carroll and Norm Chow fast-tracked him into USC's staff. That's why Sark is so different from the other coaches that I've been around. His whole career is built on reinvention. He went from baseball flameout to JUCO hero to BYU star to CFL flameout to Pete Carroll's golden assistant. And here's the part that no one talks about today. And if you made it this far in the video, hang tight with me and let me nerd out for a sec. In the 2000s, under Norm Chow, Sark was one of the golden boys that was going to carry the West Coast offense into the next generation. And Sark's first quarterback at Washington could have been one of the best spread offense dual threat quarterbacks this game's ever seen in Jake Locker. Jake was still a first-round quarterback, but his talents were not fully maximized in that pro-style scheme. So in about 2010, Sark fully reinvented his entire offense at Washington, going from pro-style to spread offense, from huddling and having a fullback to calling plays with boards and no huddle. You never hear of a play caller totally changing their offensive scheme midway through their coaching tenure at a certain school. Keith Price reaped the benefits of that. He was out innovating himself before other coaches could out innovate him. That moment, changing his entire offense in 2010, is the hinge point between the Sark of Life 1 and the Sark who built the offenses we see today. If Life 1 is about Sark proving he belongs in college football, Life 2 is about chasing his big chance and all all the pressures that come along with it. In 2008, Washington went winless, 0-12. I remember exactly where I was when it was announced that the Dogs lost to the Cougs in the Apple Cup, and that meant the Huskies, for the first time ever, did not win a game in the season. I was ball boying a game for my high school. They went on the intercom and said that, and everyone started laughing. At least Coug fans were laughing. Dog fans were pissed. Remember, this was a program that won a Natty and 3 Rose Bowls in the 90s. And it wasn't just the 0-12 season that frustrated folks. It was the 4-9, 5-7, 2-9, and 1-10 seasons leading up to that. So when they handed the keys to Sark at just 34 years old, it was a big deal. USC was the blueprint in college football in the mid-2000s. And UW was able to get the chosen disciple of Pete Carroll. Like I said, big deal. Then he walks in and upsets USC in just his 3rd game. I mean, come on, man. UW couldn't have dreamed of anything better. Sark had the West Coast buzzing, so he goes on to build them back into a bowl team, beats Nebraska in the Holiday Bowl, and earns a new contract after just 2 seasons. But despite the initial optimism, cracks were showing. Washington kept hovering around 7 wins, and the nickname 7 Wins Sark was born. Still, his offenses were creative. He had star quarterbacks Jake Locker and Keith Price, and the OG running back Chris Polk. And by 2013, he was finally in charge at USC. He took over for his buddy Lane Kiffin, who, remember, were both assistants during the mid-2000s golden era of USC football. Sark likely dreamed he'd have this job one day. Now he had it. But at USC, it was tough to be around him, and it wouldn't be fair to you guys watching this for me not to address the elephant in the room. During that last stretch at USC, as a backup quarterback, I was practicing under a head coach that was often not sober. And while Sark deserves a ton of credit for getting his life back on track, that was a difficult scenario to be under as a player, especially as a young quarterback trying to develop, going through a coaching change and a scheme change. I was frustrated I wasn't playing better. I was beating my own self up. That was not the environment to develop as a young quarterback. But Sark was the first college football coach to ever put his rep on the line and believe in me when he first offered me the weekend after my freshman year. So I'll always have a little bit of a soft spot for him there. And I'll say this, and this might be Sark's coaching superpower, but he could command a room like very few coaches I've been around. You know, the type of personality that could have pursued any career path. He could have been a CEO, a politician, a salesman, anything he wanted to be. He could have done it. But I'll never forget sitting front row, dead center, in a team meeting on a Sunday morning after we had lost to Washington, Sark's old school, when Pat Hayden, after a little incident, came in and said, Sark was fired. And I've never seen Sark again in person. Maybe I'll call one of his games one day. Only a matter of time. Whereas life 1 was the rise, life 2 was the fall. Sark had what was supposed to be his dream job at USC. And it took him a long time, way too long, to admit he had a drinking problem. Looking back, the fact that this apology ever had to occur is crazy.
When you mix meds with alcohol, sometimes you say things and or do things that you regret. And I regret it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of our fans and donors and all the people that were in attendance.
For those who don't remember, there was a viral video of Sark drunk at USC's annual Salute to Troy event to kick off the season. He even went on to say,
I've met with the team. We have a leadership committee. I've met with the team, Jim. The leadership committee has been tremendous in their support of who I am and what I'm about.
In fact, I was actually part of that leadership committee meeting. But I'll say this, he's a talented coach who can command any room. He is one of the best play callers in college football, and I'll always remember him as the first coach to ever offer me a scholarship. I just had him at his worst stage, and it wasn't pretty, but good on him for turning it around. Most coaches just don't come back from that. One chance at Washington, one chance at USC, and then usually the sport just moves on from you. But instead of disappearing, Sark found his way back. First at Alabama under Nick Saban, then as an NFL coordinator, and eventually back to Saban again. That stretch where he rebuilt himself away from the head coach spotlight set the stage for Life 3. Life 3 is the comeback, the chapter nobody thought Sark would write. Becoming a head coach again, this time at Texas. I remember at the time, people were like, what? This dude didn't work out at UW and USC, and then now he's getting the job as the head man at Texas? But I firmly believe Sark not only got that job because of Saban and the experience there and the credibility, but also timing. because the coaching pool that offseason was very weak. Saban took a huge gamble hiring him the very next season after the USC situation. And it was a move only someone with Saban's credibility could have made at the time. Anyone else would have received major pushback. Sark will tell you himself that Saban changed everything. Here's what he said to Saban at SEC Media Days. "I would not be standing here today without you and what you've meant to my career, to my life, and I can't thank you enough." In terms of what he's learned from Saban, he described it like this: "You knew exactly what you were going to get from Nick Saban. Every day it was almost robotic, and the players knew what to expect. Life 3 is the redemption, and sure, they lost to Ohio State week 1, but they're coming off 12 and 13 win seasons. What he's built at Texas is impressive." And for me, it's wild because I had Sark at his lowest. My USC teammates and I still talk about it in our group chat, how crazy it is that our Sark is now the coach in college football. The coach I played for wasn't right. But this version, he seems steady. And he's built a culture of winning again at Texas. I'm fascinated to continue to watch Life 3 for him. And shoot, if I'm a betting man, there's probably a Life 4 coming. Sark's young enough where he's got a lot of runway left. Because genuinely, good on him for changing and getting to live Life 3 to the fullest.